Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be showing you how I paint my pumpkin wagon. So here I've laid out all the pieces on sticky tape and I'm using a cosmetic sponge to apply the base coat. If you haven't seen this technique before, you take a cosmetic sponge and put paint on it and tap most of it off so that you're only applying really thin coats of paint to your wood. That way the paint does not seep into your scored or engraved lines. Here I am taking an X-Acto blade to clean out any paint that may seep into those lines. Also, for the really small pieces, I cut my cosmetic wedges in half or even in 4 pieces to give me a really small piece of sponge that I can apply the paint to the small areas of the wood. When you apply the paint this way, it dries really fast. So here I am going back and putting a second coat on some of the areas. Now I'm using a brush to apply paint to those really small handles of the wagon, being careful not to get paint into that engraved line. And here I'm just applying a second coat to the base of those pumpkins. Okay, now I'm going to start adding just a few highlights to the pumpkins. On my palette, I added just a little bit of cream white to the base color of the pumpkin and made a lighter shade of orange. And I'm taking a fine detail brush and adding that to the ridges of the pumpkin to give it some dimension. And here I do the same thing for the pumpkin that's inside the wagon. And here I do the same process for these pumpkins as well. I continue to add cream to my orange to get a lighter shade to apply to the pumpkin until I'm satisfied with the color. And you can just keep playing with it until you like what you get. The look that I personally go for is not a dramatic white highlight on most things. I just try to get a lighter shade of my base color as my highlight. And you'll see that it's just a process I go through to just get what I think looks good. And it's just paint. Remember, you can always paint over it if you don't like it. And here's an up-close look at what it looks like once the highlights are added. We'll add the shadows in a little bit. Okay, here I'm going to start adding shadows to the wagon. And if you haven't seen my previous video on adding shadows or shading, you might want to check that out for a more detailed explanation. But I'm using Folk Art Floating Medium is the name of it. And you work that into a clean, damp brush And then you dip the corner of your brush. Here I'm using an angled shader brush, but you could use just a flat brush. And I get burnt umber right on the edge or the tip of the angled shader, and I work that into my brush so that when I apply it, it's not straight paint. It's mixed with the shading medium, and I'm going along each ridge of the wagon, the engraved ridges, and adding a shadow. And here I'm adding a little shadow to the handles of the wagon. This technique can also be used with just water on your brush, but most people find it easier to use the floating medium because it goes further than the water does, and it makes shading easier for people who've never shaded before. But it's like a gel, kind of. It's like hair gel. And you dip your brush in it and then dip the corner of your brush in the paint that you want to use as a shading color. And you work it into your brush a little bit before you actually put it on the wood. I'm sorry, this part goes off camera just a little bit. But I'm just going to continue the shading process until I have it the darkness that I want it. Okay, now I'm going to start base coating my flowers and the wheel of the wagon and get everything ready to glue on. Here I'm making sure everything is ready to glue on, and I'm using CA thick glue, which I get off of Amazon, to glue all my pieces together. It grabs really fast, so you have to make sure that you've got everything in place when you use it. Here I'm deciding what I'm going to use to paint the stems of the pumpkin. I started with a paint pen, but it wasn't the right shade of green that I wanted, so I ended up painting it with regular paint and a brush. Here I'm making sure everything fits where it's supposed to, and I'm making sure the highlights are the way I want them. I think I decided that this one was a little too bright, so I toned it down a little bit with the base coat and then went back and added more subtle highlights. Now I'm gluing the pumpkins in place, and then there's a spacer for the edge of the wagon that I'm gluing in place, and then the finished piece goes on top of that spacer. Here I'm just going to touch up the stems a little bit, and then I added a little bit of a highlight to the stems as well. I added some yellow to the green that I had base coated the stems with to make a lighter green for my highlight color. Now I'm taking tweezers to glue my little pieces in place. Here you're seeing me mix cream with the brown that I used for the wagon to make a lighter brown that I'm adding to the wagon to make it look like it's old and got some wear and tear on it. This is like my highlight color, and I'm also adding it to the middle of the wheel. And I'm sorry this goes off camera a little bit here again. I'm not a professional video maker. Y'all just bear with me. Now I'm using burnt umber that I used as my shading color for the middle of the sunflower. And I'm trying to figure out how this one fits on the other one so I'll know for sure that I got the middle painted as far as it needs to go over. Here I am using the CA glue again to attach my flowers in place. And off camera I added some little white dots to the center of that flower to make it look like seed. And then this top flower has a separate piece that goes in the middle. And there you have it, the finished product. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can find the cut file for this design on my Etsy page titled LC Laser Designs. Thank you.